What's going on, everybody? Jolt here from the Token Minorities, and I am joined by
Crobat for the win, here today on the second Monday of the week.
And we are here with our second installment of our new series called Drafting with the Elite. And we are very impressed with all of the nice feedback that we received on our first episode of this, and I really do appreciate the fact that so many of you took the time to leave us a comment and give us some feedback and just kind of let us know how you enjoyed the video. So thank you very much for that, and we hope that you'll continue to do that in the future as well.
Certainly. And one other thing, I gotta thank Shoddy for showing me that chlorophyll tangrowth. Thank you. Also, one other thing, I know today, when we're recording, is Tuesday, but it's really the second Monday of the week. Wednesday is the third Monday of the week. Thursday is the fourth Monday of the week. You learn this stuff when you're in the working world. I'm working 40 hours a week, so every day is really Monday. I just wanted to clarify.
I feel so bad for you. I'm really enjoying this last summer I have before I really get busy. But anyways, on to the real reason we're here today.
Yes.
The core today that we are going to build around was actually suggested by my friend Kelly Under the Radar. Definitely check out his channel if you haven't already. It will be in the description below. That core is Heatran, Azumarill, and Mega Sceptile. So the cool thing about this core is that it encompasses both a Fire, Water, Grass core and the Dragon Fairy Steel core at once, as Heatran has the Fire Steel typing, Azumarill has the Water and Fairy typing, and Mega Sceptile, of course, has the Grass and Dragon typing. So while that's a very cool core for that reason alone, it's actually kind of tough to build around, just because it does have really a lot of weaknesses and even a lot of common weaknesses.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things, I think we should just briefly go over what our team should have before we actually get into the rest of the mons. Do you agree, Joe?
I do agree.
All right, so I'll get started, and I'll stop halfway through, and I'll let you finish. So, obviously, we need to form a defensive core and a balanced core. We gotta have 2 strong priority options, 2 stealth rockers, 2 hazard removers, 2 speed tiers, ideally above base 10, 1 wall breaker. Going for the kill, Joe.
1 ground immunity, 1 electric immunity, a fast taunter, and shout out to Bob, Call Me 911, for that suggestion. That's definitely something that should be added on here. And a pursuit trapper, a bulky water, and another thing that probably should have been added to our roles for building around a defensive core. Even for building around a balanced core such as this, it's good to have a very strong check to flying attacks. Many people call it a bird check. For example, bulky electric types, bulky rock types, that kind of thing. That's pretty necessary in trying to support a balanced core. And of course, it's also important to complete a Fire, Water, Grass core and a Dragon Steel Fairy core. Luckily, that's already taken care of here with our core that was initially chosen. And finally, Toxic Spikes and Spikes are indeed an option once again.
All right, we ready to jump in?
I believe so. Actually, before we jump into the draft itself, now is the time that we're going to start to discuss our theme of the day. And this is something that is going to be a new addition to this series. There were a handful of suggestions that were asking us to go a little bit more in detail on the drafting process for these videos instead of just, drafting a team around a certain core. So the theme today that we want to discuss is the draft order and the order in which coaches should select certain Pokemon in a draft. And Danza, you can go ahead and start this one off if you want to.
So, alright, so the theme of the day is obviously order with regard to drafting. One of the things you have to keep in mind when drafting is, well, you don't want to take, say, Stunkfist in the first draft. You gotta go with mons that either have high point values or are top tier. If you don't do that, someone else will take them. The ones that are lower tiered, lower point values are generally better off picked in the middle to the end of the draft. That's something that's very important for anyone to understand. If you look at some of the previous drafting history for whatever league you're in, say the NPL, if we looked at the previous 4 seasons of the NPL, we can get a general idea of where things are picked. You can do that for your respective leagues. If you want to look at all leagues and see where mons are picked, you can get another good idea of where things are generally picked. I think those are a few pointers that I can give. What do you have, Joel?
Yeah, at least for me, in my first 3 picks, I tend to also avoid Pokemon with 4 times weaknesses just in general, because I find those to be more easily exploitable just due to having that weakness. And kind of like Danzo was saying, the really powerful or bulky or just high tier Pokemon in general are what you want to go for in early rounds, in my opinion, or just Pokemon that seem to have a lot more demand. For example, really bulky electric types, bulky or fast electric types like Zapdos and Raikou tend to go pretty early. That'd be something I would personally go for in an early round. In addition to, let's see, what's another good example? Things like Clefable, like last time, things like Clefable and powerful Mega Evolutions, like even Mega Pinsir, despite its 4 times weakness, would be something you want to do in an early round just because it's something that almost certainly someone else in the league is also going to want, and you want to make sure you pick it before someone else does. That's kind of the idea behind a draft. You want to make sure to get what you want before anyone else can. But in terms of the middle of the draft selections, that's generally where I would pick high tier UU Pokemon, so it's not really a good way to put it, higher level UU Pokemon. For example, things like Nidoqueen, things like, let's see, Darmanitan is a very good UU Pokemon. Got any other ones that you can think of, Danza?
Haxorus is a very good UU mon that I like to use personally.
And I guess
I have it on my MPL team.
And I guess this point more applies to things like a point system, just because in open draft you generally can take the best thing available in the middle of the draft, which isn't always going to be UU Pokemon. Sometimes there are some OUs that are left straggling depending on the size of the league and how many people are in your draft order and etc. But yeah, just in general, the middle of the draft is generally where you'll select your higher tier UU Pokemon, lower tier OUs, BLs. Obviously, Victini is one of the best Pokemon in the format, so that borderline Pokemon is definitely going to be a first-round pick. But yeah, and then for late-round picks, it's generally the stragglers, things that have a role that is fulfilled by several other Pokemon as well. For example, a Bulky Water, if you don't want like one of the amazing Bulky Waters, then you can probably draft your Bulky Water in one of the last 4 rounds or so, just because there's so many of them that'll accomplish that same role of tanking the hits that Bulky Waters tend to tank.
Yeah, there are a lot of them. I mean, even looking at, say, Blastoise will likely be around in some of the last rounds. It's a pretty good mon, so you don't necessarily need, say, Milotic or Vaporeon or what other Bulky Waters exist, Jolt? It's almost midnight.
I don't know.
It's not working.
Empoleon's a pretty good one. Rotom Wash is a pretty good one as well that people like to take relatively early, and it really doesn't. While it has amazing typing, it's still, I think there's a lot of Bulky Waters that are better value picks, and you can pick them later on and essentially accomplish the same goal that Rotom would accomplish on your team.
Certainly. And one other thing I think that's important to mention is when Jolt said the things that you should go for the things generally that are higher tiered or higher points as early as possible. Always remember that team synergy trumps any of that. So let's just say, for example, you picked Zapdos 2nd round and you see it's 5th round and somehow Raikou's still around. But it seems like everything else is all UU. All the rest of the OU stuff is basically taken, but you see Raikou is there. Don't think you should take it right there, because you already have an electric type. Consider your team synergy first.
Always think about, whenever you're drafting something, if you could see yourself bringing both that Pokemon and any of your other selections already in the same battle. That's something that I like to do for sure, because you don't want to draft something that you could never, like that there's certain matchups that you just couldn't bring it because you needed to bring something else that was similar to it. Like that just handicaps you. You don't want to do that. And
here's a fun example: Tyranitar and Shedinja. Probably not a very good idea. Just saying.
True, very true. Okay. Yes, not wrong. And then I guess just one final point, or 2 final points I wanted to make on this. If there's a lower tier Mega Evolution that you want to try to use in a season, that generally can be picked up later in the draft. For example, things like Mega Glalie, Mega Sharpedo, Mega Sceptile, stuff like that. That can usually be picked up pretty late in the draft just because it's going to be low in demand. And, if it's low in demand, you can generally afford to pick it up later. And then one of my personal favorites for a last round pick is Wobbuffet, as for whatever reason, very few people like to draft a Wobbuffet, and quite honestly, it has a lot of utility in the format, in my opinion. So it's one of those high-value late-round picks that I would highly recommend, personally.
But Joel, of course you're going to say that. Wobbuffet's your
I
icon.
might be a little bit biased, but Wobbuffet is very good, I promise. Envy can back me up.
So, are we ready to jump into our draft for the week?
Aye, aye, Captain. Here we are with the open draft version behind this core, and again, just like last time, we are assuming that Heatran, Azumarill, and Mega Sceptile are going to be a guaranteed draft selection, that those will not be sniped. That's just because that's the whole purpose behind this video. We don't want to build a draft without those. So that's what we're going to do. We are saying that Heatran should be drafted round 1 overall, just because despite its 4x weakness, it tends to be drafted in the first round. It has a lot of utility really for any team, as well as being one of the best stealth rockers in the game. So it's clearly going to be our round 1 pick here. And then we have Azumarill coming in at round 3 and Mega Sceptile at round 9. Azumarill a little bit lower than the second round just because it's slower while powerful. But still good enough to where it needs to be in the top 3 because someone will snatch it up. And Mega Sceptile, being a low tier Mega, definitely can slide down to at least about round 9.
Alright, cool. So for round 2, after Heatran, I would try to get Zapdos. It supports Heatran really well because obviously it's immune to Earthquake and other ground-type moves. It has good synergy with Azumarill because Azumarill takes the Ice-type attacks that Zapdos doesn't like. Let's see, Mega Sceptile, does it have... Yeah, it gets Lightning Rod, which also has good synergy with Azumarill. One thing between those two already, though, Zapdos, Mega Sceptile are weak to Ice-types, so we definitely have to try to cover up more Ice-type weaknesses
later.
Well,
the good news with that, though, is Heatran and Azumarill both are resistant to Ice, so that actually helps out a little bit, too.
And round 4, we're going for Scizor.
Yes.
So, there we go.
Yes.
Already there.
Definitely.
Scizor does really well on this team so far because we have Heatran, which is the best Fire Eater in the game.
Definitely, and the Scizor Heatran core is something that was very common back in Gen 4 whenever Heatran first came out, but even so, that combo has lived on through Gen 5 and Gen 6.
Sure.
And despite the 4x weaknesses, because they cover each other so well, you can definitely get away with running Heatran and Scizor in the format.
Yeah, and can't forget also, Azumarill takes Fire-type attacks
very
pretty well.
Yes.
Can also run Thick Fat if you decide to be a legend.
In fact, Azumarill actually sets up a belly drum on a lot of fire types, so that will complement Scizor quite well as well.
With Thick Fat, mind you.
Please no. just run huge power or pure power, whatever it is. It's huge power, right? Yeah, huge power. One other note on Zapdos before we move on any further, it also covers Heatran's fighting weakness, as does Azumarill, but that's something worth noting because fighting is such a great offensive type in the format.
Good point.
Okay, so moving on to round 5, we have Alakazam, and his role is essentially to serve as one of our faster Pokemon. Its speed tier is well above base 110. I think it's like 120 or 125, something really high. And Alakazam is also good as a safety valve Pokemon in that it can run Focus Sash with Magic Guard and guaranteed live any one hit as long as it's not like a multi-hitting attack like Icicle Spear or Beat Up. I know someone ran a Beat Up Crocodile, I think, to beat Alakazam before in the GBA, and that was pretty awesome if I do say so myself. But yeah, Alakazam is pretty good for the team overall, mainly because of its speed tier, but also because it can bail a team out of some sticky situations. So at this point in the draft, you have two very fast Pokemon, being Mega Sceptile and Alakazam. So we've already fulfilled the roles of needing the fast Pokemon on the team, and we also have some really good priority options in Azumarill and Scizor. We have, I believe, one Stealth Rocker in Heatran. We have a Defogger, two Defoggers in Zapdos and Scizor. And overall, it looks like we have the right coverage to be able to support Mega Sceptile pretty well, as Mega Sceptile is the Pokemon that we really want to have shine with this draft, but there are some more adjustments that can be made to help Mega Sceptile do its job, and in doing so, we believe that drafting Nidoqueen would be very helpful to that end. Despite the fact that it has a shared ice weakness with Mega Sceptile, it still has a habit of breaking the same walls that like to come in against Mega Sceptile, and that's something that's really helpful in making an underused Mega shine, is being able to break down the walls that would normally switch in to Mega Sceptile. For example, in UU, where Nidoqueen and Mega Sceptile both reside in standard play, Nidoqueen the common switch into both of them is something like Mandibuzz, and Nidoqueen can most definitely wear down things like Mandibuzz so that Mega Sceptile can take it out with something like a Dragon Pulse, for example. And there's obviously more examples similar to that in draft format, but that's just a combination that I think complements each other quite well.
Certainly, and I think it's also important to note that by getting Nidoqueen, we also have a second electric immunity, essentially because Mega Sceptile has Lightning Rod.
So that helps
which,
with Volt
that's
Turn,
cool.
for sure.
Yep, certainly, and we get an extra Stealth Rocker as well, because Nidoqueen does a pretty good job of setting up Stealth Rocks if you want it to be in that role.
Most definitely. So now we actually have access to Stealth Rocks and Toxic Spikes, so that's pretty nice as well. And
so, oh yeah, that's a good point.
And with that in mind, that's actually the primary reason why we decided it was a good idea to pick up a Rapid Spinner. So I will let you go ahead and take over here.
Sure. So next on the list for round 7, we've got Hitmontop. I think the biggest reason why, obviously Jolt said we wanted a Rapid Spinner, but also Intimidate is solid. Getting any kind of fighting type is solid. It's good, decent with its attacking stats. Has a good, decent move pool, but all in all, it's a strong mixed wall with Intimidate, Rapid Spinner, and it even has a couple priority options, which can be pretty helpful in a pinch.
So from there, we needed to patch up the defensive core, as while the defensive core is pretty decent as is, it kind of lacks recovery. In that Nidoqueen can run defensive sets, but its recovery would be rest. Hitmontop can run defensive sets, its recovery would be rest. Heatran can run defensive sets, same story, rest is the recovery. The only real defensive mon we have with recovery right now is Zapdos. So to support the potential for a defensive core, this is a balanced team, we need to have a defensive core of some sort that we can rely on. Alomomola was the clear choice here because of its ability to essentially be the best Wish Passer in the game, in that it can click Wish and still switch out and gain back HP because of its ability Regenerator. And whenever you can Wish Pass to things that are naturally really bulky like Heatran and Nidoqueen and Hitmontop, that just really supports the team so much more.
Yeah, I think the one comment I have to make about Alakazam though, it's a negative, something you just have to be very careful of. Be careful of substitute users because Alakazam has kind of pitiful attacking stats. Its attack is it's decent, but a Waterfall uninvested might not be breaking subs, and a Scald will do virtually no damage. Also watch out for Taunt. So those are a couple things to watch out for, but if you're very cognizant of those few things, Alakazam will serve your team very well as a Wish Passer. So we're jumping into round 10 because we skipped round 9 since that was Mega Sceptile, set in stone. We've got Sneasel. Sneasel is... Weavile is presumed taken, of course, by this point, but Sneasel will not be. It gets knockoff, which is good. It gets priority, which is good. It's fairly fast, isn't it? 95?
It actually hits 361, so it's 115.
115 speed,
Yep,
really?
Yep.
I thought it was a little slower than that. Alright, that works. That's even better.
Yeah.
So we break 110 speed again, and we've also got a pretty decent Pursuit Trapper.
Mm-hmm. It actually becomes our second Pursuit Trapper, having Scizor as well. I don't think anything else on the team actually learns Pursuit, but despite that,
yeah, it's a good point.
It's still just very nice to have, and Knockoff in general is really handy for more bulky offense teams like this one's kind of looking like at this point, just because it can help you wear down your opponent a little bit faster and get rid of those nasty berries that tend to ruin your day, that kind of thing.
Personally, I think we could add, as a role optional, several Knockoff users.
Yeah, the good news is
we
Knockoff
definitely already have a couple,
pretty widely
so
distributed. Yeah, it looks like we have... Does Hitmontop get knockoff? I know Alakazam does, Scizor does, Azumarill does.
Alakazam
Sneasel
does.
Not wrong. So yeah, we have several, for sure.
So yeah, but I do think that's kind of a important thing to note. Also, Ice Shard priority.
Yes, more priority is always nice, and this gives us a pretty much guaranteed stop to Dragon Dance Dragons unless they have a Yachi Berry, but you'll just need to make sure to get it in range of Ice Shard or have a Focus Sash on Sneasel or something like that to make sure you can take out those dangerous dragons. But
right.
yeah, so on to round 11.
You got this.
I honestly couldn't resist. I had a lot of success in MPL Season 4 with a dual Trapper Core for my last 2 picks, and by a dual Trapper Core I mean Sneasel and Wobbuffet. So Wobbuffet is our selection for round 11, And just due to the fact that the team only had one Psychic type so far in the draft, it already made Wobbuffet be a pretty good selection, but having Wobbuffet also just deters your opponent from doing so many things. It really alters your opponent's prep enough to the point where this team can perform that much better, and on top of that, this gives us a near perfect response to things like Mega Medicham. I realize Mega Medicham gets Baton Pass and can get away from Wobbuffet, but this gives us at least a switch into it, and perhaps a means of taking advantage of opponents who have Mega Medicham. And similarly, any other physical Psychic fighting types, like Gallade for example, this can help against that, or Mega Gallade too, and regular Medicham. I'm blanking on other physical Psychic fighting types. I don't think there's any other ones, but yeah, Wobbuffet helps with those, and just in general helping with threats that otherwise harm the team significantly, just because Wobbuffet is that awesome. Okay, so now let's go over the alternates, the substitutions that you could use for several of the different Pokemon in this draft.
So for round 2, instead of Zapdos, 2 other options are Raikou and Stunfisk. Stunfisk obviously would be in the last few rounds, so you'd have to push it.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that. Raikou could stay about round 2, maybe round 3, right around there. So Raikou's about the same as Zapdos. So those are 2 alternatives. They get about the same job done. They're just pretty bulky electric types that have Volt Switch. Yeah, that's about all I can say about that.
Cool. And then for round 4, as a replacement for Scizor, some options are Diggersby and Haxorus. The general idea is that it's a wall breaker that has some sort of priority or some sort of potential to increase its speed. Haxorus having Dragon Dance, agility, or Diggersby having both agility and quick attack for priorities. So just in general, this slot is dedicated to a powerful physical attacker, and Diggersby and Haxorus both could fulfill that role.
Yeah. So next we have round 5, instead of Alakazam, you could opt for Azelf, maybe even Siglif. Siglif is a little bit slower, but Azelf plays pretty similarly to Alakazam. Siglif also has some of its own benefits through magic. It also has Magic Guard. It also has a Defog, can run Defog, so all in all though, any one of those could fill the role of Psychic type.
Yeah, and Siglif definitely would want to be picked up much later, like round 10 or so. I don't think anyone really would go for Siglif.
It's a good point. I think Azelf, though, can stay right around round 5, maybe
I'd say like 6 or 7.
Between 5 to 7, I think.
Yeah,
right around.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, so then for alternates to Nidoqueen, Nidoking is always an option as well. It pretty much does the same thing as Nidoqueen, except slightly higher offenses, slightly lower defenses. And then Scolipede is an option too, as another Pursuit Trapper, in addition to being very fast and also having access to Toxic Spikes and Spikes. The only downside to picking Scolipede instead of one of the Nidos in this slot is the lack of a electric immunity, but we still do have, do we have, no, we don't have one. Nope. So yeah, you would probably, Mega Sceptile, yeah. You still have Mega Sceptile, so, I mean, I don't know, it's kind of a trade-off there, whatever you really think would be best in that situation, but one of the Nidos is probably preferable.
Yeah, certainly. So next for round 7, instead of Hitmontop, Hitmonlee's an option, which does have Rapid Spin. Mienshao is an option. It's even faster and has a plethora of moves it can use. And there's always Gallade, which is just an all-around, moderately fast, very powerful, good setup mon. So while they all play a little bit differently, all 4 of them, all 3 of the substitutes rather, give you a very good alternative to Hitmontop.
Mm-hmm. And really, the general idea there is to have a Rapid Spinner, so Hitmontop and Hitmonlee are certainly the preferable 2 of the bunch. But if you were to go with something like Mienshao or Gallade, it'd be a little bit harder to pull off like a spike stack strategy unless you want to essentially forego your own hazard removal. Just a thought.
Yeah, certainly. And I think one more thing that's worthy of note, I think Hitmonlee, Mienshao, and Gallade are all right about it, round 7, maybe round 8, you know, somewhere in that area. One other alternative I just thought of off my head is also Hitmonchan. So if you're desperate for a Rapid Spinner,
how did I know you were going to bring
Hitmonchan is fantastic. Although Hitmonchan doesn't necessarily have to be picked round 7. It could wait till round 10.
See, I intentionally left Hitmonchan off the list because I really dislike it, but Danza had to come through. I knew it.
I'm breaking the rules here. It's not even listed here, and I got it. I got you.
Thanks, man. Alright, so round 8 in the Alomomola slot. This is the bulky water slot. it'd be ideal if it was a Wish Passer, so for that reason, Vaporeon is an option. However, it should be noted that Vaporeon probably would have to be drafted before round 8, as if a league lets Vaporeon drop to round 8, they're doing something wrong. So it's more like a round 6, I would say, a round 6 pick. Maybe
I was going to say
round
5, but yeah.
Yeah, maybe even 5 in some drafts. And another option is Slowking. While it is not a Wish Passer, of course, it still fulfills the role necessary in tanking essentially all the hits that a bulky water generally would take. The only downside to having Slowking is that it gives you another Psychic type, so another Ghost and Dark weakness, meaning that Wobbuffet would probably not be ideal for the last round selection, but we'll get there when we get there.
Sounds good. For round 10, instead of Sneasel, there's Liepard. It has Prankster, which is interesting. You can play around that pretty well. I mean, since it gets that priority, you can set up subs and attack that way. It plays differently than Sneasel, but it also fills the role of your Dark type. That's basically the base role.
It also helps a lot with speed control, having Prankster, Thunderwave.
Very true.
As the team is, while we do have a good amount of speed and priority on the team, Thunderwave is still the best status move in the game, so I'm pretty sure that Liepard would serve you well if you decided to select it over Sneasel.
Never bad to have extra Thunder.
Yeah.
Even on fast teams. Don't ever underestimate hacks.
Very true. Okay, so round 11, Wobbuffet, like I said, is preferable unless you have to pick up something like Slowking earlier on in addition to Alakazam or Azelf. So with that said, if you are forced to have 2 Psychic types before the selection, I would advise a Guts Pokemon, or a Pokemon that takes advantage of like Toxic Orb or Flame Orb in that Ursaring or Swellow or Zangoose, something like that. Those are all almost certainly going to be around round 11 for an open draft. Just something to consider for sure for that slot if Wobbuffet's not an option. Really, all the roles are already fulfilled by the time round 11 comes around, so this is really just totally up to you, whatever you would really want to do to round out this draft, whatever meets your play style best. I just think a wall breaker in the form of one of those 3 Pokemon mentioned before would be pretty good if Wobbuffet is not the correct Pokemon for the draft.
That is a very good point. I think that should close it out.
Yeah, so that wraps up the open draft segment of this. Now let's hop over to our points system draft, so our restricted draft for this week, which is actually using the PPL, the Pokemon Premier League point system. I'll make sure to leave a link to their YouTube channel if they have one, at least their Twitter channel in the description below, since we are borrowing their system. But in the PPL, at least from what I've seen, they use a cap of 110 points, and obviously that can't be exceeded, and you can select up to 11 Pokemon. I don't think there's a minimum Pokemon for the PPL, I might be wrong, but as far as I know, it's no minimum, and you can use 110 points. And for this draft, we did decide to go ahead and pick all 11, and in doing so, we have Heatran, Zapdos, Azumarill, Nidoqueen, Bronzong, Alomomola, Hitmonlee, Liepard, Mega Sceptile, Ursaring, and why not? Why not, obviously, is probably not necessary for the team, but we had 2 points remaining, actually 3 points remaining, and we thought, why not? We'll go ahead and take it.
Oh, the irony.
That was totally unintentional, but that'll work out. So, yeah, and this team, again, is pretty decent. Obviously, it's going to be a little lower quality in terms of like how good each individual Pokemon is, just because it is restricted by points, and the points cap, in my opinion, is a little bit lower. It's not just my opinion, it's definitely a lot lower than what the MPL uses, so the quality of the draft itself is going to decrease a bit, but overall I still think it's a pretty good team. One thing worth noting on this version of the team is that it has a very solid Trick Room option in having the Bronzong and the Ursaring as a combo, as Ursaring under Trick Room can put in a lot of work against a lot of teams, and just even in general, Bronzong is a pretty reliable Steel type with 2 pretty awesome abilities. But what do you think about this team, Danza?
Oh, overall I like it, and I like the prospect of being able to use Trick Room. I'm looking at it and I see Heatran, I see Azumarill, I see even Nidoqueen, I see obviously Bronzong, I see Ursaring, and well, I see at least, that's what, 5 Mons I think I counted? 5 Mons that look great in Trick Room. I like that a lot. Also, I wanted to talk about, why not for a second, if you give it an Eviolite, it takes hits just about as well as Wobbuffet. It's the easiest 2-point eater in the world. It's a pretty good choice for the last slot. It still counters Mega Metacham, still counters most fighting types pretty well. So I know I was a little appalled when Jolt said that at first, but then he explained it to me and I understood. You know, that's pretty cool for only 2 points. I liked the idea.
Yeah. And then one other thing worth noting on this team, we did opt for Liepard over Sneasel, mainly because it was cheaper, but also given the amount of slower things we have, now that we include Ursaring in the bunch, that Thunderwave support really helps this team out a lot, especially if you don't really want to run Trick Room in a certain matchup. You can spam Thunderwave and still put in a lot of work with like a Choice Banded Azumarill or a Choice Specs Heatran, something like that. Or even Life Orb sets, you know, anything that's slower and powerful can really benefit from the Prankster Thunderwave.
Just do not run Thunderwave with Trick Room. Obvious Ostrich 101.
Okay, so I think that about wraps up this episode. Thanks for watching, guys, and again, just like last time, please do leave any comments if you have suggestions for us on how to improve this. This is our second go-around, so I hope it felt a little bit cleaner to you all. I know it did to me. And again, just leave some comments if you have any more core suggestions for us to build around. I know we had a handful of suggestions on the first video. Keep them coming. We're writing them down as they come in, and we'll try to get to every single one of them as long as it's viable. Most of them, I think all of them have been viable so far, so we'll try to work around those as time progresses. But yeah, any final words, Dan?
Yeah, I actually had a request. Can we finally do my Magikarp Feebas Sunkern core?
Oh my, again? Man, I might not bring you along for the next one. Alright, I think that wraps this up, guys. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.
Rate, comment, subscribe, guys, and peace out.
What's going on, everybody? Jolt here from the TheTokenMinorities, and I am joined by...
Oh, is that my cue?
That's your cue.
I'm sorry. We're gonna...
That's going at the end as a blooper.